Hey guys, welcome back. Now let's talk about a little bit of theory of how you should study endgames before we get into the practical examples. So again, endgames happen infrequently, they have limited importance, really be aware of that. It's nice if this is your hobby, you love studying endgames, go for it, but it's not where you will see the most improvements. And that is what this course is really about, to use the time wisely where we can improve the most. Keep it simple, right? Study only the basics. If you want to have the maximum returns, then do the basics, do them well, repeat them from time to time, but that's it. You don't need to know fancy things in the end game. Then you will also be able to learn concepts and not moves. What do I mean? There are, several specific endgame concepts that you will find in books, and you can apply them in different positions. So it's beautiful to be able to extract concepts, not moves. So not, oh, I just have to play this, but to understand again. It's about the understanding of the move. What is the reason behind it? Because like this, you first of all remember it much better. And second of all, you can also reproduce it in positions that you've never seen before. Then once more pieces are still on the board in the end game, calculation becomes extremely important, actually also in pawn races, right? You need to be able to see ahead quite far in end games. There are not so many pieces as in the middle game. The king is not as vulnerable, so it's more about calculation to maybe promote a pawn. It's more about tactics that help, a pawn maybe to promote. You sacrifice a bishop so a pawn can be a pass pawn and then promote into a queen. There are such things that you need to be aware of. So also, if you study tactics, if you solve tactical exercises, if you solve calculation exercises, you will automatically also improve your endgame play. The more precise you can calculate, the better your endgame play will be. And if there are even more pieces on the board, so let's say queenless endgames, there's just a queen traded, but there are some bishop pairs and two rooks still on the board, then many things of the middle game still apply, because the king is not as safe if there are, two opposing rooks, two bishops, and two knights on the board. Then the king still stays safe where he usually is in a middle game as well. So you can transpose some knowledge, and then when pieces get traded, then it's more about calculation and different endgame principles that you will be able to learn quite quickly. Well, this is the 10th reminder, but I'm sorry for repeating, but it's just important. Keep it simple. You can't study everything, right? It's not that it's senseless to know something. It's just that there are other things that are much more important to know. And that's why we don't want to study bishop plus knight mate. We don't want to study how to win with a queen against a rook. We don't want to study rook plus bishop against rook, because those are things that people recommend to amateurs, but those are things that even grandmasters are struggling with. And because it happens so infrequently, it's not that important for you. Now, people might say, well, but you remember Caruana, he didn't win rook plus bishop against rook in a candidates tournament, and he would have maybe, qualified earlier for a world championship match. Yeah, okay, he is playing for a world championship match, right? There are very small things that make the differences. But on your level, other things make the difference. It doesn't make a difference if 1 in 1,000 games you make half a point more because you're actually able to convert rook plus bishop against rook when your opponents play it badly, right? Or to hold with the rook. That doesn't make the huge difference. The huge difference make other things. So that's why keep it simple and just learn some principles. So here are some principles. This is not a complete list, right? I just want to bring you into the mindset of what principles could be, some examples, and then we will also see some more principles that I'll explain you, and you'll have the resources where you can research some more principles and learn all of them. So one thing that is important, rooks belong to open files, right? You also should know that already from the middle game. They are just much better placed on open files. Then trade one rook if you are material up. That's very important, and that goes for any other piece also. When you have a pawn advantage or more than a pawn advantage, you want to, trade pieces so you get down to king and pawn against king, that you hopefully know when it is winning and when it is a draw. So these are the basics that you need to know, and then you can just trade down to it, or try at least to trade down to it. You need to know that when opposite colored bishops are on the board, it's quite drawish. These bishops, cannot attack each other. They cannot attack the pawns that the other bishop is actually protecting. So if you have, a white bishop on the white squares, you can protect several pawns by that bishop, and the other bishop cannot attack your pawns anymore. That's why even if you are down 1 or 2 pawns, these endgames are quite drawish. This is a good rule to know. Then knight endgames are actually very close to pawn endgames. That means that if an endgame would be winning with just king and pawns, then most likely the knight endgame will be similar. Obviously, the big difference is if you just have one pawn, then you want to sacrifice this the opposing knight for this pawn, and it will be a draw. But if there are still more pawns on the board, this is a general rule. If you think that king and pawn would be winning, then most likely knight endgames will also be winning. So yeah, you need to learn the basics of theory, and as I said in the introduction, it's beautiful because we have several choices actually of books that give you enough. So one of these books or one course is already enough to cover all the basics, basically until the end of your chess career. And that is just so amazing. Imagine 40 years ago when people were just thinking about, well, which endgame should I study? Do I have to know this? Now you just have people teaching you, okay, I had this with so many students, and I know on this level you just need to know this. Here is what you need to know, and here is why it is like that. And now, you're just equipped with this knowledge, and the only thing we need to add to it is to repeat it from time to time so we don't forget it. The focus is really on what happens frequently. Again, this will then be also when we analyze our games, we will realize, oh, actually we had this endgame now already 3 times. Maybe it's time to study it a little bit more. But when you have it, every 1 in 100 games or not even, then, well, we just, let it be. We know there are more important things. And again, understanding is more important than memorizing. This is the same as in opening theory. You want to understand why you need to make certain moves, and then you can remember much better. And it's not just, oh, I need to make this move, but what do I want to accomplish, right? Oh, I want to cut off his king. That's why I need to make this rook move. Okay, now it makes sense. Now the next time you think about cutting off the king, you will find the exact move. That is very important. Okay, and then at the end, I want to give you some ideas how you can, further when you finish studying with the book, or while you study with the book or with a course, how you can further improve your endgame play or just remember what you learned. So one thing I really like for endgames is actually creating flashcards with very little key endgames. And this works very easily. You just have on one side, you have a position, and on the other side, you have the solution of that position. And you really only take things that you absolutely need to know, right? So let's imagine you work with a book and there are maybe 15 endgames that you should know for your level. And 7 come extremely logical to you. Yeah, like it's just so obvious, right? It's too easy. It was like for the step before. So you don't need to remember them because you already know them by heart. Then you have 8 positions, and those 8 positions you put on a flashcard. And you have to do that once. I would actually make it even, just on normal paper with a pen. You draw the board, you put the pieces on the board, and then you write behind, that's the move and that's why. And then every month, maybe every 2, every 3 months, you can just take these 8 flashcards and you test yourself. Do I know it? Do I know it? Do I know it? Do I know it? Okay, I know it. Perfect. That's it. And that will be your endgame remembering ritual. That's it. And if you progress to a next level, you just add some of the new positions. You maybe take out some of the positions that you anyway know already. And then you remember those new ones by doing the same ritual again every month, every 2 months with those flashcards. And just like this, at the end, you will maybe have 50 flashcards if you really improve a lot. And I'm talking about improving 300, 400, 500 points, that you then have 50 flashcards that you really need to remember. But if you remember it well, it's really a thing of half an hour every month to go through them. And yeah. Okay, I remember. This I didn't remember. Let's check. That's why. Okay, let's do it again. And when you have all of them correct, you know you have them in your brain. Don't be afraid to go into endgames you did not study. That is so important. So again, the most studying we will do is learning by doing in endgames. So it's important that you don't just take a draw when an endgame seems uncomfortable or you don't know what you're doing in this endgame. Just follow your instincts and go to the end games, and then later on you can analyze them and you can learn from them, right? So I also have a rule with my students usually is that they are not allowed to offer a draw at all. So even if you have an end game with a rook and 3 pawns against a rook and 3 pawns, you still want to play it out because this gives you additional learning possibilities. You will see how many mistakes actually still happen in these kind of end games, which seem super drawish. And maybe grandmasters, they will just make a draw. But for you guys, it's better to just, slowly get some more practice, and it's like a free learning opportunity. So do it. As I said, use every chance to practice end games. Don't make these early draws. And then one last thing you can do when you study endgames is to put yourself in time trouble, okay? Because at the end of the game, you will not have much time left. Doesn't matter if you play blitz, rapid, classical chess. If you are in an endgame, most likely you are surviving on seconds, right? You cannot take 15 minutes to calculate an endgame. So what you can do, you can have your flashcards, for example, and you can say, I need to see the right solution in 10 seconds, right? So I put myself in time pressure. Like this, you have a similar situation like in the game, because again, in the game, you won't be able to study for 15 minutes. So it doesn't help you too much if in the 14th minute of calculating, you will find a solution in an endgame you should know. So here is the summary of all that you just learned. Learn the most basic endgame theory, say no to everything else. Study some endgame concepts. Again, this can be very, rudimental, it doesn't have to be too much. You just need to know the most important things. And actually what is nice in endgames, you can also take out concepts from theory, because in endgames, everything has a sense, everything makes sense in general. And in opening, sometimes there is so much engine influence, but in endgames, there's a lot of logic involved, especially for the endgames you will need to know. And then say no to anything else. That's really the key. It's funny that I make a course when I tell you, well, basically, the most important thing is to not do too much, but we really have limited time. And this is just the point that goes through this whole course. We want to think about what is the biggest return on investment because we have limited time, and where it isn't, we need to be strong and say no. And also sometimes maybe look stupid when your friend is saying, hey, I know this bishop plus knight, mate. And then you just have to say, I'm happy for you, mate, but I'm spending my time elsewhere and I'm happy with it. Okay, this was it. That's all you need to know on how to study endgames. Now let's go into some practical examples, how you can do it with the resources that I recommend in the later video. And then you will be set to have the great basics in endgames and have fun playing them and improve them while doing. Learning by doing.